Hello and welcome to another edition of the Rolling Illini, the first one of 2020 and the first one since I just found out October 25th, 2019. I am Joshua Joins, joined as always by Avery Schaefer and Miles Hill. For those of you that don't know what this show is about, on Monday through Thursday there is the Illini Drive, which focuses on the able-bodied sports and throughout the University of Illinois. But on Friday we bring you something a little bit different called the Rolling Illini, which focuses on adaptive athletics and disability culture as a whole is something we're trying to bring new to the show this year. So that is super exciting. And for those of you that don't know why we haven't been on air for such a long time, the Sunday after that October 25th show, the basement here of the YMCA flooded and kind of ruined the studio. And we had to wait until the studio was back up and running. And we just decided to take the rest of the semester off as stuff was starting to gear up and finals were trying to get here. And we are so glad to be back. And we are on UPTV on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. So if you want to see what my face looks like, tune in. Do it. It's worth it. Hey, Miles, how have you been, and how was your break?
I've been doing well, Josh. Looking forward to the second semester. My break went well. I needed to see the family, but I'm glad to be back up in Champaign and back with the team and everybody that I know and love around here. And so I'm ready to get to the second semester.
Yeah, for sure. Avery, how are you?
Well, long story short, my break wasn't much of a break because I spent it studying Python programming.
Why would you do that?
Because the journalism department thinks it's prudent that they require us
CS 105
to study that for some reason.
CS 105?
Yes.
Yeah, I took that when I was a journalism major.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. So over my break, I got to go to Colorado.
Okay.
Ryan Wilson, the former founder of the show, did a piece right after he left on an organization called the National Center for the Sports of the Disabled, or the NCSD. And it's a group out of Winter Park, Colorado, that works with adaptive athletics of all sorts. And during the winter, Winter Park, Colorado is a huge ski resort. And so they run adaptive skiing. And what's so cool about this organization is that they can adapt skiing for all types of people. So I can stand up and ski, but I need these little outrigger things to help me balance. That was it. But they have all these different setups for sit skis and mono skis. And like I saw an amputee, a single leg amputee, tearing it up on the moguls, which are like the bumps. And it was really, really cool. So over 4 days, I went from taking an hour and a half to get down the easiest slope to get to the top of the mountain and coming down. And it's really, really awesome. So just shout out to that organization. They work with all sorts of physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities. The visually impaired were my favorite to watch because they have guides, and there's a lot of trust there with those guides because if they lead you into a tree, you have no idea until you hit the tree. So they were great, great people, and it was really an awesome week to get to spend up there with one of my friends who was a sit skier, and then to get to ski with my family. So that's awesome.
What resort was it?
It was Winter Park. So it's actually in the resort of Winter Park. So there's there's 27 ski lifts and 60 slopes. So wow. I was exhausted. Skiing is exhausting.
Yes.
My shins hurt for days, but it was so worth it, and it was super awesome. And the mountains are beautiful. So that's cool. Shout out to that. And then it kind of ties into to Ryan Wilson being here and getting to do that. I didn't know about that until I texted Ryan, and he was like, "Yeah, I worked with them." So super awesome. All right, now to change gears, because October 25th was before Illinois wheelchair basketball played any games.
Any basketball.
There was no idea how the season was going to go for either the men or the women's team. It was all this anticipation. Right. A lot has changed since then.
Indeed.
So let's run through it. Miles, you want to take the men's side?
Sure. So, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to get some of these dates wrong because it was such a long time ago. So I'll just go with the first weekend of November. The men and the women headed up to the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater, and the men played 4 games there. We went 3-1 with wins over UNO, Missouri,
And Alabama.
and Alabama. There we go.
And
I'm not
Alabama
bad.
being the defending national champions. Now, obviously, it's not the same team that they had. They have a 7-foot Aussie player who graduated, and they lost some key players, but still a really, really solid team and a really solid win early in the season. I mean, and I can't remember the exact final score, but it was a pretty good margin.
It wasn't a very close one, but yeah. With that being said, those were big wins for us, and it really helped get our season started. For that note, you got some.
Yeah, I do have a note. The Illini actually played 5 games in Whitewater. They also had a win against the Southwest Minnesota State Mustangs.
Well, you know what?
Yeah, so started the season 4-1. So that was awesome, and that's the best start since I've been here. So in 3 years, best.
Take those.
I think it's the best start under Coach Matt Bushy's since his first year here. So I mean, what that shows right off the bat is like the early tournaments show you kind of where you're starting, and it shows that the Illini are starting at a baseline that's been much higher than they've been in the past.
Yep.
There's a lot of experience with this team, and the past couple of years when we've talked about it on the show, there was a lack of experience. It was all about we've got inexperienced guys.
Yep.
Last year's class of freshmen had 4 players. 2 years ago it was 5 players. So last year you had 9 players on the team who were freshmen or sophomores.
Yep.
This year those guys are sophomores and juniors, have the experience, and it's a really fun team to watch.
It's a lot of fun to be a part of too.
Yeah, so that was the only tournament we had in first semester.
Yep.
Then came back for 2 days.
Yep.
For those of you that don't know, the NCAA allows coaches to have 2 practices a day during off times, so when you have no school. So we came back on January the 5th,
Yep.
Started practicing at 9 a.m. on January the 6th, and went 2 a day, so 2 practices and then 3 lifts a week. For 5 days a week until we left for Omaha, Nebraska last weekend.
Yep.
And in Nebraska,
we finished us 32-2 with wins over UNO and Missouri and losses to University of Wisconsin Whitewater and Arizona. This being our first and I think our only time this year playing Arizona.
yeah,
But though that was a close game for us, and I think it was really new. It was important that we got to at least see them once this year because they're new to the college division. So it was important to see what they have, how we matched up against them, and what we could really work on to make sure that when we play them, if we play them again this year, that we're ready for that. So.
Yeah, Arizona is the newest addition to the college division. So they've flirted with being a college division team in the past. This is the first year that they finally have a team together that's all academically eligible and enrolled. And
Yep.
it was kind of a disappointing loss because at one point in that game, the Illini led by 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Early in the first half, 10 or 11. Let that lead dwindle, and it was tied at halftime. And then in the second half, the Illini were down by as much as 10, so it was a heck of a fight back. Hit some late threes and to only lose by 4. It was kind of a weekend of highs and lows. Yes, the Illini went 2-2, but there were a lot of things that we looked to improve upon, and that's kind of what practice this week has been all about. It looks like is about making those corrections so they don't happen again. Missouri was also missing their head coach and one of their best players. Both will be back when we talk about next weekend's games, which is coming up soon. The Illini will be in Missouri for games next weekend. We'll talk about that. But we also got to go back and talk about the women's team because the women's team is doing some incredible things as well.
On fire.
Led by a master's student Canadian, Katie Dandino.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain.
Yeah, Katie Dandino is a Canadian who has come in and just lit the Illini team on fire, taking a lot of pressure off of Emily Oberst and allowed them to work together. And they started their season. Whitewater was actually a very important tournament back in November for them because they played all of the teams in the women's college division. So they beat the University of Wisconsin Whitewater pretty handedly at home. That was a good win. Beat UTA pretty handedly.
Which was important.
Yeah, important. And then Alabama was a loss, but there was a lot of fight. At one point, they were down by 20, and they came back, and, I mean, it was a one-possession game, I believe.
Oh, they lost by 2. No, Katie took
Yeah,
the game winner.
They
and then
made it
just ran out.
close.
It was,
Yeah.
it was crazy, man.
Which has been interesting because the University of Alabama women's team has 2 very tall, big players that they play all the time,
Yep.
which is kind of what the Illini is now emulating.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to see that matchup head to head, and they finally figured out how to get them. And so when they played them I think it'll be in Alabama in March. They'll be ready to go. And I would bet you that'll be the national championship game in the women's division. It'll be the University of Alabama versus the University of Illinois.
That's where my money's at.
Last week in Omaha, the women went 3-1, beating the Wisconsin Whitewater twice, and then, they went 2-1. 2-1, beat Wisconsin twice, and then played a men's team, so it doesn't count towards the record, but it was a close loss there. And I mean, that team is really, really good, a good D2 team. So, the Illini women are very, very exciting. They are right in the hunt for national championship contention with Katie Dandino and Emily Oberst, and Ali Ibanez will be back. So super, super exciting times in Illinois wheelchair basketball. Next week is the first time the teams will split. The University of Illinois men will be playing in Missouri, and the women will be playing the Big Cheese Classic in Milwaukee. That'll be a good test for the Illini women because they'll be playing a lot of women's teams.
Yep.
And then for Illinois, we will be playing Missouri again, 2-0 against them, but that is a tough team, a well-coached team.
They are. It's surprising that we've come out with these wins. Not that we aren't able to, but they're a very, very well-coached team.
They were a team that the Illini had failed to beat each of the last 2 seasons. So coached by U.S. Paralympic head coach Ron Likens. So very, very well-coached team. We will also be playing the Auburn Tigers for the first time this season. That'll be a good matchup. I'm excited about that game. I've had it marked on my calendar for some time. And then we are also playing Edinburgh for the first time. Is that?
No, actually, I think we're playing Uno again.
Oh, the University of Nebraska Omaha again, which we've also beaten twice this season. So 4 of the Illini's 6 wins have come from the same team. But that's how it goes early in the season.
Yes, this is true.
So, just super exciting times for Illinois wheelchair basketball. Both teams, I think, are in contention for a title this year, and I say that realistically. The Illini are looking at a 2-3 seed right now, and that assumes that they can't beat the University of Wisconsin Whitewater, which I fully believe they can.
Yeah.
And if they do that, they'll be the number 1 seed. So, super exciting times to be an Illini and to follow them. And I wanted to mention this early because there's only a couple shows between now and then. The University of Illinois home tournament will be at the Arc.
Yes, sir.
And not in 3 weekends. So
Valentine's Day weekend.
It's Valentine's Day weekend. So bring your significant other. You know what? Nothing says romantic like Illinois wheelchair basketball. Yell lovely things at us onto the court. Just be there, be loud. The marching band will be there.
I will be there.
Yeah, Friday at 6 o'clock when we play the Auburn Tigers, and then 6 o'clock p.m. on Saturday night we'll be playing the Wisconsin Whitewater Warhawks. Both of those will be great games, and then we also play Edinburgh and SMSU, Southwest Minnesota State.
Yeah.
So at 11 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. So pretty easy schedule. Remember, we will post it to our social media pages. We need the Illini to be out there and be loud on Valentine's Day weekend. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back here on WPGU 107.1 and the Rolling Illini. And we are back here on the Rolling Illini, right here on WPGU 107.1. I'm Joshua Jones, joined as always by Miles Hill and Avery Schaefer. And every week we task Avery with bringing in something that we call the last big thing. Sometimes it's last, sometimes we put it in the middle, but it's a big thing relating to something that may not relate to sports, but definitely relates to disability culture because we feel like that's something that's misunderstood sometimes and really important for the community as a whole to understand. And so, Avery, what do you got for us this week?
In honor of the Super Bowl coming up in 2 weeks, and the Pro Bowl on Sunday, I thought it would be prudent and fun to talk about accessibility in and around sports stadiums and different venues, and just kind of share our horror stories that each of us may have had, or generally have a dialogue about that. So I'll start. My worst experience, I'm sorry, White Sox fans, but my worst experience was at what is now called Guaranteed Rate. It's on its 3rd name in the last existence of the stadium. I don't know how long, but long story short, the wheelchair seating in the stadium is obstructed by these hefty concrete poles that prevent the view of someone whose chair can't rise like mine can. So that's my worst sporting experience.
You know what's really interesting about that is, that is definitely an issue, but I think that also applies to like able-bodied seats too. Like, and it happens at Wrigley Field. I love Wrigley Field. Let's start with that. The ramps are kind of a doozy at Wrigley Field. I've been a couple times, but once you get beyond the ramps, like the people who work at Wrigley Field like want to help people with disabilities so much.
Oh, they're great.
They are so great about that stuff. But there was a couple times that we went there with some teammates of mine, and we were obstructed by some poles as well because we like to be undercover because you never know what the weather's going to be like in this state. And so it was somewhat obstructed, but the same thing was true for people who weren't in the handicapped seats. So I think that's something that applies to both. I think the ramps are the big issue. Like, and sometimes not all seats are accessible. Like, obviously not all seats are accessible because there's stairs, but like there's some places where certain parts of the field aren't accessible.
Yeah.
And that can be problematic for sure. I mean, the Illinois wheelchair basketball team knows the Memorial Stadium ramps up close and personal. Those ramps are so steep that it's a workout for us in the preseason, like that we actually do as a workout.
This is not a lie. This is very true statement.
But yeah, so
How does that go? I have to ask. Like,
we just push up and down, forward and backwards on the ramps. And honestly, the worst part, and I think this is also true if you go to the game, is coming down the ramp. Because like there's 12 of us in wheelchairs coming down the ramp, and sometimes we hit each other, and sometimes we go out of control.
Dude.
I can't imagine trying to navigate a wheelchair down that ramp while there's hundreds or thousands of people going down that ramp with you.
Like these, because those ramps are like actually really steep. Like you holding your wheel with your hand while going
Hurts.
down this ramp. Yeah, exactly. It hurts. Like it hurts your hand to keep the pressure on your wheel from not. So if you're using a manual chair, man, that's got to be tough, dude. I don't know if I can do it. Like doing it in a ball chair for a workout, that's one thing. But when this was for my leisure, I was coming to this game for fun. I don't know. Those ramps were no joke, man.
Yeah, Avery, this is a question that you can answer better than Miles and I can because Miles and I don't use wheelchairs on a day-to-day basis. How do you consider the number of accessible seating to be at like different places you've been? Like, what place do you think has enough accessible seating, and which places do you think could improve upon that a little bit more?
good question. And it all depends on the version of the word accessible that is used to define the accessible seating itself.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes accessible seating at some venues means people who can get out of their chairs, take a couple steps, and transfer into a seat, like one of you. But for me, that wouldn't be considered accessible. So I can only answer this question based on the definition that is accessible to me, and based on that, I feel that the best sporting venue I've been to in recent weeks, or not in recent weeks, recently, actually is Busch Stadium, where the Cardinals
Really?
call home. If I wanted to, I could get field level access to actually go on the field and throw out a ceremonial first pitch or something like that.
That's awesome. I know that my good friend Colin LaFawn is from Atlanta, and in his time here, he's since graduated. Really enjoyed going to Chicago sporting events, and he couldn't say enough nice things about the United Center. He went to Blackhawks games and Bulls games, and he's like, there's not a bad seat in the house, and especially not with accessible seating. So that's something. And something that a lot of people don't think about is like how far in advance people with disabilities have to think about buying tickets, right? Because the average person can buy, tickets to whatever spot they want to. But as a person with a disability, like if me and 4 of my wheelchair basketball friends want to go to a game at the State Farm Center, we got to buy those tickets early, or else there's no guarantee we're all going to be sitting together in accessible seating. And so that can be difficult. I went to the Miami game that we were talking about while we were off air. I went with my roommate Gabe and a couple other people, and we ended up not sitting together because there were so many people who needed the accessible seating that those of us that could walk upstairs and had to sit together and sit away from our teammates who used wheelchairs to get around. And that's kind of difficult at times. So I think that's another thing that people don't think about a lot is just because there's an even smaller finite number of accessible seats that you have to think so far ahead when you want to go to an event. It can't be like, oh, I want to go to this Illinois-Michigan game that's tonight. You have to think about that a week or so in advance. So what's your take on that?
It also depends on how popular the event is.
Yep.
For someone like Taylor Swift, or
I love me some T-Swizzle.
someone who's going to draw a large crowd,
That was line of the year, man.
that is very much true. However, if you know people in the industry like we do, there are, or like at least I do,
Oh, you got it like that, Avery, man. We don't got it like that, man.
there are certain tips and tricks, and a little charm doesn't hurt either.
Yeah. I mean, and going back to the State Farm Center thing, like the people who were trying to help us couldn't have been nicer. It was the Michigan game, which was a big game. Sorry, it was not the Miami game. I just was corrected by my roommate who texted me. It was the Michigan game. And so it's a big game. And so, I mean, that's on us for not thinking ahead,
They
but
play Michigan tomorrow.
they do. And we're going to talk about that here right after this in a hot second. But yeah, so I think accessibility is something that a lot of people don't think about unless you're in the disability community. And I think it's so important.
Yep.
And it's something that I think about a lot with my friend group here that maybe I don't think as much about at home with my friend group at home that's mostly able-bodied. So it's kind of a different take for me. But that is an awesome big thing of the week, Avery. We're going to take a quick break here in a hot second. But first, let me remind you that the Illini Drive and Rolling Illini are brought to you by the University of Illinois Division of Intercollegiate Athletics. Guess what, guys? We're actually good at basketball.
This is true.
We're ranked the highest we've been ranked since 2013, I believe. We're ranked 21 in the country.
14.
Since 2014. Sorry, I messed up by a year. I apologize to the 2014 team. We have knocked 5 straight opponents off, including an impressive win at Mackey Arena at Purdue on Saturday. The Illini are away tomorrow at Michigan, so that'll be a really, really tough game. But if they win that game, which I believe they will, they'll move up in the rankings, which is important. But also, that will create a matchup at home next Thursday, State Farm Center against Minnesota. So you need to go and buy your tickets right now. Be at the State Farm Center. First tip's at 7 p.m., I believe, for that game. Be there and get all of your tickets at findingillini.com.
And one other thing,
Oh, man.
if they win that game, they will be in sole possession of first place in a very competitive Big Ten.
This is very true.
At least for now.
Yeah, college basketball has been wild this year. North Carolina's terrible, and
It's a shame.
the Duke fan says. And the Illini are good. A couple more wins, and they are going to guarantee themselves a spot in the NCAA tournament. So you need to get out there and watch them. Get out and watch these guys. This is an impressive team. A lot of talents. I love watching Kofi and Trent and all those guys do their thing. But there's so many other sports you can get out watch. There's gymnastics going on. I know I got to check out some gymnastics during 2 days.
Some wrestling.
Some wrestling wrestling?
Yeah,
We got wrestling going on. I know tennis is going on this weekend. So to get a full list of athletic events going on, once again, go to findingillini.com. Get out and sports your Illini, wear orange and blue. We will be right back after this commercial break here on the Rolling Illini on WPGU 107.1 Champaign. Hello and welcome back to the Rolling Illini. To end this week's show, this is something that I kind of just stumbled upon on Twitter this morning. A story that I kind of liked and kind of looked more into. It's a guy by the name of Jack Jablonski. He 8 years ago was a high school, a very prominent high school hockey player. Hockey is a sport we all know and love in this state and in this region of the country. It's a sport that I've grown to love because Atlanta's lost 2 NHL teams. So didn't know a lot about it, but really fell in love with it since I got here. And he tweeted yesterday, I had always dreamed of signing an NHL contract. Unfortunately, that dream was taken away 8 years ago when he was hit in a high school game and became paralyzed. But today, I'm proud to share that I've started a full-time job with the LA Kings as a content coordinator and working in podcasting, radio, and TV. Thank you for all that helped me. So I looked more into him. He's a super awesome guy. The spinal cord injury was a quadriplegic injury, which means he uses a power chair to get around. But what's super awesome about him is he, in 5 years, graduated from the University of Southern California, USC, with a degree in journalism, which is something that we've all come to know and love. And what's super cool is that representation thing that we talk about week after week. He's getting to talk about something that he loves, hockey, which is a passion that he still has. But he also gets to be a person with a disability who does that so that it becomes more of the norm. And I think that's what's super cool about that. It's very similar to what we're doing. Yeah, he's talking about hockey, but somebody who went through journalism school and graduated and is working in radio and podcasting and all the things that I know that the group of people that are in this room really enjoy to do. And so that was a story that really caught my attention. He runs a foundation that is working to make sure that paralysis is something that isn't permanent. So they're doing different trials and stuff. It is so it's the BEL13VE Foundation. So believe with 13 in the middle foundation because 13 was his number. So if you guys have a chance this week, you should check that out. It's super awesome, and it kind of was a heartwarming story, and I'm super excited. I'm cheering for him from Illinois, even though I have never met him. So that is the story of the week. Do you guys have anything else to wrap the show up with?
I just want to say, on that note of, I just wanted to say on that note of him accomplishing that and making it in, of course, not on the ice, but in a way of making it into NHL work, and that's just really big, especially for someone with a disability. Like dreams in sport, especially when you acquire a disability through life, and I know you and I both, or actually all three of us here, we have congenital disabilities, and it's severely different to be born with a disability than to acquire it through life. You know what I'm saying? Because this is something that you have to relearn in a way, and it's really big that he's able to not only to relearn how to live, be an advocate for himself, but also now he's into his own dream, and that's something that's even beyond representation. Is you can be represented as we want people with disabilities to be doctors, be lawyers, but the real reason we want that is because kids with disabilities want to dream to be these things, and for him to make and find something that he loves to do is really big to see. So
that's awesome, and it's why I brought up the story. So I'm glad you brought up that point.
To think it is one thing, to actually do it, a completely other thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great way to end the show this week. Just a reminder, we will not have a show next week as Miles and I will be in Missouri with the Illinois wheelchair basketball team. But we'll be back in 2 weeks to preview the home tournament and to talk about all things disability life and beyond. So thank you so much for joining us for the first show of the new decade, the first show since October the 25th. We promise we'll be back before 3 months, and we hope you all have a great week. Avery, take us out.
Keep it rolling.
All right, we'll see y'all next week.